Good evening. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that sounds either like a logistical nightmare or the premise of a truly terrible reality TV show, polygamy. Yes, the practice of having more than one spouse at the same time. Now, before you start picturing some sort of utopian free-for-all, or more likely, a domestic situation where the argument over what to watch on TV escalates into a multi-front war, it's important to understand that the rules around this are, to put it mildly, a complete and utter mess. Polygamy laws vary wildly around the world, creating a chaotic patchwork of legal, illegal, and, well, it's complicated. So tonight, we're going on a whirlwind global tour, a sort of legalistic Epcot, to get a concise overview of where polygamy is legal, where it's illegal, and where it's practiced anyway, because as we all know, a law is only as good as the people willing to ignore it. Now let's be clear, when we say polygamy, we're generally talking about polygyny, one man with multiple wives, as that's the most common form. Polyandry, one woman with multiple husbands, is, and I cannot stress this enough, incredibly rare, which is a shame, because frankly, it seems only fair. But for our purposes, we'll stick to the more prevalent setup. This isn't a moral debate about whether polygamy is right or wrong. Frankly, I struggle to manage one relationship and a demanding houseplan, so the idea of juggling multiple spouses gives me a sympathetic anxiety attack. Instead, we're just looking at the cold, hard, and often contradictory legal facts on the ground. So, buckle up. We're about to dive headfirst into a topic that touches on religion, tradition, human rights, and the simple, baffling question of just how many mothers-in-law one person can reasonably be expected to remember on their birthdays. It's a journey that will take us from the bustling cities of Africa to the deserts of the Middle East, and even to, yes, Utah. Because of course, it leads to Utah. It always leads to Utah. This is Polygamy Laws, Global Insights in a nutshell. Let's begin. Right, let's start with Africa, a continent so vast and diverse that trying to summarize its stance on anything is a fool's errand. But, because I am that fool, here we go. In many African nations, polygamous marriage isn't just a quirky exception, it's a legally recognized and culturally embedded institution. We're talking about countries like Senegal, Mali, and large parts of Nigeria, where customary law runs parallel to civil law, creating a system where a man can legally have up to 4 wives. It's often deeply tied to tradition and religious practices, particularly Islam. It's a system that has existed for centuries, and for many, it's as normal as, I don't know, complaining about the price of avocados. It's just part of the fabric of society, for better or for worse. But, and this is a continent-sized but, it's not that simple. You can't just throw a dart at a map of Africa and assume polygamy is on the table. In some countries, it's a legal minefield. Take Kenya, for example. In 2014, they passed a law that formally legalized polygamy, but it caused a massive uproar because it removed a clause that required a man to get the consent of his existing wife before marrying another. The ensuing parliamentary debate was, to put it mildly, chaotic. And then you have countries like Ghana or Uganda, where polygamy is technically illegal under civil law, but it's still widely practiced under customary law, creating a bizarre legal gray area where your marriage is both valid and not valid at the same time. It's the Schrödinger's cat of matrimony. And finally, you have the other end of the spectrum. Countries like Tunisia and Ivory Coast have outright banned polygamy, full stop. In Tunisia, it's been illegal since 1956, and taking a second wife can land you in prison for a year. They took a firm stance, viewing it as incompatible with modern principles of gender equality. So, on one continent, you have a complete gamut of legal frameworks, fully legal and regulated, illegal, but widely tolerated, and completely, unequivocally criminal. It's a perfect illustration of how a single word, polygamy, can mean wildly different things just a few hundred miles apart. It's less of a single rulebook and more like 54 different board games, all with their own house rules. Okay, let's move east to the Middle East and Asia, where the legal landscape is, if anything, even more tangled, primarily because religion steps onto the stage in a huge way. In most of the Middle East, polygamy, specifically polygyny, is broadly legal, drawing its justification from Islamic law, which permits a man to have up to 4 wives, provided he can treat them all equally. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Jordan all allow it. It's a system enshrined in both law and tradition. However, the provided he can treat them all equally part is a massive, and I mean colossal, caveat. Critics argue that achieving true equality in finances, time, and affection is practically impossible, making the entire practice inherently unequal. Now, even within this region, there are fascinating variations. Some countries have tried to put modern guardrails on the practice. In Egypt and Syria, for instance, a man might need to prove to a court that he has the financial means to support another family before he's granted permission to marry again. It's a bureaucratic hurdle designed to temper the practice. Then you look at a country like Malaysia, a real standout case. There, polygamy is legal, but only for Muslims, and it's governed by regional Islamic courts. A man must get permission from the court, which often involves proving financial stability, and, crucially, that the new marriage is just and necessary. This creates a two-tiered system where your marital options are literally dictated by your religious affiliation. But then you have Asia, a continent that refuses to be put in a simple box. While polygamy is legal for Muslims in places like Indonesia and the Philippines, it's strictly illegal in others. China, Japan, and South Korea all have an ironclad one-spouse-only rule. India is a particularly fascinating case study in controlled chaos. Polygamy is illegal for Hindus, Christians, and Parsis under the Indian Penal Code, but it is permissible for Muslims. This legal carve-out is a source of intense political debate. And then you have places like Myanmar, where polygamy is not legally recognized, but is still practiced in some rural communities, flying completely under the radar of the state. It's a legal tapestry woven with threads of religion, secularism, and stubborn tradition. All right, let's hop over to Europe, where things get, on the surface at least, refreshingly simple. When it comes to polygamy, the entire continent basically sings in unison: Nein, non, niet, no. Bigamy, the act of entering into a marriage with someone while still legally married to another, is a criminal offense across the board. From Portugal to Poland, from Ireland to Italy, the law is crystal clear. One spouse at a time, thank you very much. This legal uniformity is rooted in centuries of Judeo-Christian tradition and secular legal codes, like the Napoleonic Code, which firmly established monogamy as the only legally recognized form of marriage. The idea of the state sanctioning multiple spouses is about as alien to European law as the concept of a reasonably priced train ticket. However, and you knew there was a however coming, didn't you? This is where it gets interesting. While you cannot polygamously marry in Europe, the continent has had to grapple with a tricky question. What do you do with polygamous families who immigrate from countries where their marriages were perfectly legal? This is not a hypothetical. People from North Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere arrive with family structures that European law was never designed to handle. The response has been a typically European exercise in pragmatic bureaucracy. Generally, the first marriage is the only one that is fully recognized for legal purposes, like citizenship or inheritance. But for limited purposes, some countries have been forced to acknowledge the reality of these other unions. For instance, for social security or welfare benefits, a second or third wife might be recognized as a dependent, not as a spouse. The UK, for a time, had a system where they might recognize these marriages for welfare claims if they were legally contracted abroad, though they've since tightened those rules significantly. In France, they've taken a harder line, often refusing to grant residency to additional spouses. So while Europe presents a united front in criminalizing the polygamous marriages on its soil, it's in a constant awkward shuffle trying to figure out how to deal with the ones that show up at its doorstep. It's a legal and ethical headache of the highest order. And now, to the Americas, North and South. Here the legal story is, much like in Europe, one of overwhelming prohibition. From Canada all the way down to Argentina, polygamy is illegal. Period. Every single country in the Western Hemisphere has laws on the books that make bigamy a crime. This legal framework is a direct inheritance from their European colonial forebears, the English, Spanish, and Portuguese, who brought their monogamous legal and religious traditions with them and baked them into the foundational laws of these New World nations. So, if your dream is to start a legally recognized multi-spouse household in Brazil or Mexico, I'm afraid you're out of luck. The law is not on your side. But, as always, the most interesting part of the story is found in the footnotes, and in the Americas, that footnote is spelled UTAH. Yes, we've arrived. While polygamy is illegal in all 50 US states, Utah has a unique and complicated history with the practice, thanks to the early history of the Mormon Church. For over a century, the state has been home to fundamentalist Mormon splinter groups that continue to practice plural marriage in defiance of both state law and the mainstream LDS Church, which officially renounced polygamy in 1890. For decades, polygamy was a felony in Utah, but it was rarely prosecuted unless there was evidence of other crimes, like abuse or welfare fraud. This all came to a head in 2020, when Utah did something fascinating. It decriminalized polygamy. Now let's be very clear, it did not it. You still can't get multiple marriage licenses. Instead, they reduced the penalty for consensual polygamy among adults from a felony to a mere infraction, basically the legal equivalent of a parking ticket. The logic was that by removing the threat of serious prison time, people in polygamous communities, particularly victims of abuse, would be more likely to come forward and report crimes without fear of their entire family structure being prosecuted. Meanwhile, in Canada, the Supreme Court has upheld the country's ban on polygamy, and in parts of Latin America, there's virtually no debate on the issue at all. So, the Americas remain staunchly monogamous, with one very weird, very complicated, and very Utah exception. Finally, let's take our legal jet lag to Oceania, a region of vast oceans and scattered islands where the legal currents mostly flow in one direction. In the major nations of the region, Australia and New Zealand, the law is as straightforward as a kangaroo's punch. Polygamy is illegal. Both countries inherited the English common law system, and with it, a strict definition of marriage as the union of two people. Attempting to marry a second person while you're still married is the crime of bigamy, and the law has very little patience for it. If you walk into a registry office in Sydney or Auckland and ask for a marriage license for you and your two partners, you'll be shown the door, and possibly a pamphlet on the criminal code. The legal systems in most of the smaller Pacific Island nations, like Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, generally follow a similar pattern, with laws modeled on those of their former Western administrators. Monogamy is the legal standard, end of story. However, the region's complexity comes not from formal state law, but from the persistence of custom and tradition. On some of the more remote islands, customary practices that may have historically included forms of plural marriage can still exist outside the formal legal system. These are not state-sanctioned unions, but community-recognized arrangements that operate in a parallel social reality, largely invisible to the central government. The most significant wrinkle in this, however, can be found, perhaps unsurprisingly, in Australia. While polygamy is illegal nationwide, there has been a fascinating and limited recognition of traditional Aboriginal unions. In certain specific contexts, particularly concerning social security and welfare, the government has acknowledged polygamous-like relationships within some Indigenous communities. This is not the same as legalizing polygamy. It's a pragmatic recognition that these community structures exist, and that refusing to acknowledge them can lead to unfair outcomes, for instance, in distributing benefits to dependents. It's an incredibly sensitive and complex balancing act between a uniform national law and the unique cultural heritage of the continent's First Peoples. It's a classic case of the law trying, very awkwardly, to bend to reality. So, after that breakneck tour around the globe, what have we learned? Well, mostly that anyone who gives you a simple one-sentence answer about the legality of polygamy is either lying or deeply uninformed. In short, polygamy's legal status depends heavily on a dizzying cocktail of regional traditions, religious laws, colonial history, and recent, often controversial legal changes. It's a global legal system that looks less like a coherent plan and more like a bunch of different people tried to assemble the same piece of IKEA furniture without looking at the instructions. The result is a wobbly, confusing, and frankly, hazardous piece of social policy. The key takeaway here is that you absolutely cannot make assumptions. The law can change dramatically just by crossing a border. What is a celebrated cultural practice in one country is a felony in another. What is a recognized religious right for one group is illegal for their neighbors. And what is a crime on the books might be a common practice on the ground. The gap between the law as it is written and life as it is lived can be enormous. This isn't just an abstract legal puzzle. It has profound, real-world consequences for individuals and families caught in the crosscurrents of these conflicting norms. Ultimately, the global conversation around polygamy is far from over. As societies continue to grapple with questions of gender equality, religious freedom, and the very definition of family, these laws will undoubtedly continue to shift and evolve. The only constant is complexity. So, as a final piece of advice, and I cannot stress this enough, always check local laws before making any, let's call them ambitious marital assumptions. Do your homework. Or you might just find yourself in a relationship that's not just complicated, but also highly illegal. Thanks for watching. Good night.